Hey everyone, and welcome to the studio. This is the month we've all been waiting for, or at least many of you have asked me about water. So we're going to be painting water. We're going to actually be diving into the subject of painting water of all kinds. We're going to do some waves, some still water with reflections, some rocks in water, some streams and creeks. And I think we might even have to spill over into the next month to get it all covered, because there's really a lot of information that we can talk about when it comes to painting water. So what I wanted to do to kick off Water Month is to start in today with just a very quick demo of a creek in a marsh, just to get us started, get us in the mood. But before I do that, I want to go over 3 tips for painting water. Now, there's a lot of things we can learn about when it comes to painting water, but these are 3 things that I think if you can embrace and you can remember when it comes to painting water, you're going to have a better chance of success. So let's just go over the list here. Number 1, when you paint water, you always want to make sure your water is level and flat. That means both at the horizon, so where the water meets the sky, needs to be perfectly level and flat. No wobbly lines, and it can't slant up or down. If you have to measure to get it exact, then go ahead and measure, but it has to be perfectly level and flat. Where the water meets any type of bank, like water in a pond or in a stream, where it touches the bank, it needs to be perfectly flat and level. If you make it with a curved line, it will not read right. It won't look right, even if it looks that way in a photo. And I want to do a little quick experiment just to show you right here. The water in this glass is level. As I tilt the glass, watch what happens. The water wants to stay flat and level. I think this is fascinating. The more I tilt it, the more it tries to stay perfectly flat and level. Can you see it?
Yeah.
I want you to remember that when you paint water, your water needs to be flat and level. If it wobbles, if it curves, it's not going to look right. And I'm going to give you some tips on how you can paint curved water to make it look like it's flat and level. We'll get to that, but just remember that tip. Number 2, and this goes along with number 1, when you paint water, it is very good practice to paint using horizontal strokes. So, strong horizontal strokes when you paint any type of water. If you paint water with nice gestural strokes all over the place, it's going to look like you've colored in a shape. It's not going to look like water. But if you make strong horizontal bands, it's going to lay flat and it's going to look more like water. So that's an easy way to paint water, horizontal strokes. The color of water. We have to always be aware of what's happening in the environment where the water is. What is underneath the water? What is on top of the water? What's being reflected into the water? Water is basically colorless. It takes on the color by what is in the environment. So a lot of times the mistake is made when we automatically think water is blue and we paint it blue, and we're not really being aware that maybe it's being it looks green because the green trees are being reflected in the water, or maybe the sky has a really yellow glow. So the water's not going to look blue, the water's going to look yellow. Alright, so be aware of the environment, and that's going to determine the color of the water. Water is not always blue. So if we can keep these 3 things in mind, we're going to have a better chance of success. So I wanted to just kick off the month with these 3 things, and I'll be giving you a lot more information as the month goes on. So let's go over to today's demo. And I've already started this painting. It was started for another demo, a workshop demo, and I didn't finish it, but I'm going to finish it today. And I started it by using an alcohol wash with a dark blue number 305 Nupastel, and it's a really good way, a simple way to start a painting. This is my reference photo. It's just a nice lazy kind of creek going back into the marsh. I love painting these kind of things, but a lot of times they don't look right because we paint the water with curvy lines rather than flat horizontal level lines. And I'm going to show you this before I start painting. If I were to draw the water the way it is in the photo, Look at how curved these lines are. They're very rounded. So let's just assume I'm going to draw the water and I copy what I see. It's going to look something like this. And what ends up happening is you have this kind of amorphic looking shape that looks like you pasted it on the page. Instead, if you draw your water using straight lines and angles, it's going to look like it belongs in the landscape. Let me outline what I've done already here. These are the banks. This is a bank. And this is the outer edge of the grass. I used straight lines. I didn't use any curves. Here's a curve. I made it into a straight line. We're going to talk a lot more about this when we talk about painting rivers and streams. This is just kind of a preview, but I didn't want to pass up a chance to drive this point home. Straight lines and angles. Alright, so the underpainting is in place. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce the darks. Reinforce the darks. So I'm using today, this is Terry Ludwig Pastels. This is the Richard McKinley landscape selection. So I'm going to challenge myself to use only this selection for the painting. So the first thing I want to do is reinforce the dark. So I pick up one dark value pastel and I pick up a violet. So wherever I see the darks, I'm going to just come back with this violet and reinforce those darks. Now I have this distant landmass in the back here. I'm not going to use the same violet because they're too far back, and so since they're in the distance, they're going to actually be a little bit lighter, so we'll leave those alone. So that's one dark. Let's go with another layer. I'm going to put in a dark blue. Now this is similar in value to the violet, so when I put them together, our eye is going to optically blend them into a very nice dark. Let's go with one other dark value. The grasses here are kind of green, kind of golden green, so I'm going to use a dark green. I'm going to go over very lightly. I want to use a very light touch because I want some of those, the blue and the violet, to peek through. Now I have a very really rich, super dark, this is a Terry Ludwig dark, that I don't want to use everywhere, but I do want to use it where I think it will be extra dark, and that would be at this first bank, and maybe a little bit down here in the foreground. So I don't want to put it everywhere because then it's going to lose its impact. Alright, so now I've reestablished the darks. The next thing that I want to do is paint the sky because I want to set the mood. What kind of mood am I after? Well, in the photo it's kind of a overcast, dreary day, and I think I might want to brighten it up a little bit. I think I want to make it a nice sunny blue sky day, and that's going to totally change the color in the water, which you're going to see in just a minute. So before I do that, what I need to do is establish these distant banks, the distant trees, or I think it's buildings back there. I'm going to just make it distant tree line. So I'm using a dull gray down blue-green for a nice distant color. Here's another, well, that's a darker. I'll use a darker blue-green at the base. And then I have another little spit of land that's even further back. So I want it to be even cooler. So I think I'm going to go with a dark blue, a cool blue. And I'm going to make a nice straight line. And that's land that's behind those tree lines. So now I can establish the sky. Now here's a little trick for painting the sky and water. What is going to be in this little bit of sky? I'm going to flip it over in my mind, and where where the sky is, it's going to affect what color the water is. So when I flip this over, it's really going to only affect this top part of the water, meaning that there's actually more sky that we have to think of when it comes to the water that's lower. And that'll make sense in just a minute. So this is a lower portion of the sky, so I can't use a really dark blue because it's really just the lower portion of the sky. So I'm going to use kind of a middle value blue, and then it's going to get a little bit lighter, and then it's going to get a little bit warmer. So here's a turquoise blue that I'm introducing. There's something on this tape, on this board, kind of like little bits of paper, so it's kind of creating a texture which is interesting. I don't dislike it, but it's one of those unexpected things. And there's a very, very pale yellow that I'm putting at the horizon, because the horizon's going to get a little bit lighter. So I got a lot of texture going on in the sky. What if I really didn't want so much texture? What could I do to get rid of it? Well, I could take my pinky finger and just very, very lightly knit these colors together and kind of smooth out the sky. And that's an effective way to blend without pushing down too hard and destroying all the luminosity that the pastel has. What if I wanted there to be little wispy clouds? I could put those in right now on top of the sky. And just put a few. Alright, so now the sky's in place, the distant land is in place. I'm going to start to develop the grasses. Before I develop all of the local color of the grass, I want to think about what is underneath the grass. What colors can I put underneath the grass so that the greens, when I put them on top, will be a little bit more interesting and exciting. So I think I'm going to put some golds and some yellows in underneath the grass. So this is what I would consider the dirt. So here's a nice ochre. And if you'll notice, I'm using flat horizontal lines to paint the distant grass. Why? Because I want the grass to look like it is flat and going back into space. And as I come forward, I'm going to incorporate a peachy color just to warm it up a little bit. And I do like the gold, so the ochre, ooh, almost dropped that one, the yellow, so I'm going to use a combination. Tone down the peach was a little bit too bright. I'm going to dull this down a little bit so that I can use this one in here. So I put that peach down in there, and then I realized, gee, that's a little too bright. It didn't feel like it went. And I talk about this a lot when it comes to choosing colors, and oftentimes I'm asked, do you use the color wheel to choose color? And basically I don't usually, but what I do is I use what I think will look right, what feels right. So I'll say, well, you know, when you're putting together an outfit, you ask yourself, would I wear this? Do these colors go? So when I put that peach down, I realized it was just not fitting. So I've toned it down. Now I like it. It's not too intense, it's not too bright. So here's what happens. Here's the underpainting for the grasses. Now I'm going to go with the local color, which is more green. So we have, in this particular set, some very muted greens. I don't have a lot of bright greens in here. So I'm going to use a lighter, duller, muted green for the distance, and I'm using those horizontal strokes. Here's another one. And those horizontal strokes can get a little bit wider as I come forward. And then as I come into this area here, I can change the direction of my strokes because we can start to see the front edges of the grass. And then the greens get a little bit brighter in the foreground area. Now, I'm challenging myself to use this particular set. If I had other pastels available to me, I would probably go into the box and get some warmer, brighter greens. But as part of the challenge, I have to use what is here. And that's always a good thing. Make it work. It's fun. So I have to use what is here. I'm just going to reintroduce that darker green. There is one bright green in this box, and it broke, so I only have a little bit. But I'm only going to put it where I, excuse me, where I really want you to look, and that's in these foreground grasses. Right in here. And right now you can see I'm just using big chunky marks of grass. I'm not using individual blades yet. I will. Those are coming. I just have to set up the big masses of grass first. We're at the stage now where it's time to put in the water. I'm just going to pull these with my finger over to the edges. So remember a little bit earlier I said I'm going to take the water, flip it over. So what is at the horizon will be at the most distant bit of water. So it's that pale yellow. So I'm going to come in. That's not the one I used. With the pale yellow, and I'm going to make flat horizontal marks. Flat horizontal marks. If I had made the water like this or like this, it wouldn't look as believable. That's the word I was searching for, believable. Then as we go up into the sky, what happens? It gets a little bit warmer. We have that turquoise. So I'm going to introduce the turquoise into the water. Right in here. Kind of make sure I have a smooth transition. Then what happens? It goes into the lighter, cooler blue. And it sneaks over in here. Now one thing I want to do before I go any further is I want to pull down some of these grasses so that if there were any little bits of reflection, it would be in the water right here. You can see that I didn't leave much room for the water, so we're going to have to fix that. What's up here? It's actually going to be a little bit darker as we go higher in the sky. So that means the water in the foreground here is actually going to be a little bit darker. So I'm actually going to put more water in this painting than there really is, that I had, just so that you can see what happens. It gets darker. Could it get that dark? Let's see. That might be a little too dark, so we can dial it back a little bit. Now you might be saying, what about the grasses? That doesn't look right. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to take my workable fixative, and I like to use Blair, very low odor, workable fixative, and I'm going to spray this foreground area where the grass is. We're going to let it dry. Meanwhile, I'm going to pull the grasses down in to create a reflection. Sometimes if you don't have enough pastel going, you can take the pastel and pull it down just to help. And by the way, this demo is incorporating several of the things that we're going to be talking about over the next month. I'm going to darken the edge of the water just a little bit more, pull some of the grass in. And now I can take my greens for the grass and pull it a little bit over the water. So like I put some water in and now I'm taking some out. Put some in and then I'm going to take some out. And then that way it will look like it is part of the whole landscape. I need a green that kind of pulls all of these colors together. There's not any kind of green that's in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take pastel pencils. Now, you're probably thinking, if you know me, well, I've never seen her use pastel pencils ever. And that's because I usually don't. But I want you to know, I have a box of pastel pencils. And I thought tonight, why not pull out the pastel pencils to make some of these grasses? So what I'm doing is I'm going back over the green, the bright green, and I'm trying to tone it down to get it a little bit, fit it in more with the rest of the painting. And not only that, these pastel pencils will allow me to make some interesting textures in the grasses. And it's a lot of fun to come in there and do some scribbling with your pencils and break up these harder shapes and pull some up over the water. So it's important to put the water in so that you can come back, whether you use pastel pencils or whether you use hard pastels or even soft pastels. What you want to do is put in the big shapes first so that you can come in and add the detail. The detail comes last. I want to show you another thing before we end today's video. One other thing that's really important that I'm going to show you. I'm going to have fun with these pastel pencils. When you have water, you want to show where the water hits the shoreline, so you want to make a few current lines. So I'm going in with a lighter pastel and going on top and creating some of those current lines. And sometimes you have to go back and forth. You don't get them right the first time, you just go back and forth. Pull some more grass over them, put them in, take them out. It's really important that we realize that very rarely does the painting come together on the first try. You know, a lot of times it's deceiving because you watch an artist do a demo and then the painting's done and they're done. But oftentimes they have to go back and forth until they get it right. So I just added another little bit of water. One thing that I want to point out, and I think I'm going to do it now, is this green is a little too isolated. So I'm going to introduce it into this other layer and incorporate it a little bit more so that it's not in such isolation. And then I'll come back and tone it down. There we go. So I think I'm going to stop for now because the main thing that I wanted to share with you, water, perfectly flat and level, the color of the water, and using horizontal strokes. And those three things are really going to help pull your water together. So I look forward to sharing more with you this month, and let's have fun and let's paint.